Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be for EDU 552 on Chapter 5 of Literature for Children by David Russell on picture books. Today's picture book is Jumanji. Jumanji. You probably know it from one of the many movies that they've made now, possibly the original, The GOAT with Robin Williams, or the ones that they've rebooted over the past 5 years, featuring a video game with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Kevin Hart and Jack Black. So, today's book about Jumanji. You'll learn all about it. Here we go. Now, the book was made in 1981 by Chris Van Allsburg. So, I guess overall the book isn't like that old. It's really not that old. Interestingly, Chris Van Allsburg has made a lot of other books, and probably his most other notable one is The Polar Express. So I guess kind of when you look at it, the images are relatively similar. They're just more black and white in this book than compared to The Polar Express. So this story overall follows like the movie. The movie stayed overall pretty true. It just added a few extra elements to the story, which is expected from a movie. The book follows Judy and Peter as they basically go throughout the story playing the game Jumanji. And instead of it being like in the movie where they're in this like abandoned house, the kids live at the house with their parents, and the parents are just going away for like just a few hours. They're just running out. And the kids are bored. They go outside and they find a board game by a tree. Now, interestingly, you find this out in this little information about where they find the book or the game in the very front opening of the book and in the first picture inside of the book. So it's not really necessarily stated that they find it until a little bit later, but I think that's a really cool little quirk inside of this book. So like I said, this book follows the movie for the most part. All hell breaks loose inside of the house once they start playing the game. And obviously the only way to finish the game is by somebody actually finishing the game. Somebody has to roll and keep moving their dice or their pieces all the way until they finish. This book is really engaging. It's really awesome. It's a great story, but it is kind of scary. Interestingly, when I found the book at the public library, it wasn't in the picture book section. It was actually in the like children's fiction section, and it was one of the only picture books that I could see weren't necessarily in the devoted picture book spot. And that's probably because this book is kind of scary and the images are kind of unsettling. The art in this book is really, really, really awesome. It's all black and white, which I guess even for like the 80s, that's kind of weird, right? Like that, usually we'd have color in our books by then. But the way that Van Allsburg is able to create depth into a 3D image, even though it's just black and white using shadows and different shades of gray, it really makes everything stand out. It makes you feel like you're there. You're inside of this story. Right from the beginning, aside from a total of like 4 or 5 images, you're basically placed at the eyesight of the characters and of a child. So as noted in the Russell text, this makes the reader feel very claustrophobic. And that's because the pictures are so big on the page and you're so close up to the images, you don't really know where to look, right? Like maybe it might look different on this screen, but when you actually have the full-size book in front of you, it's hard to see everything that is going on at once. So it makes you feel a little bit uneasy about the entire situation. So this picture is probably one of the most famous. It's obviously in the movie too with the monkeys. I would argue that these monkeys are way cooler and have aged way better than the ones in the original movie. But I guess that's a conversation for another day. But even like this image of rhinoceroses and rhinos running through the living room, you're placed right at the eye level of that rhino. And it makes you feel as though the rhino's coming right at you. The other interesting part about this book is that all these images seem to be frozen in time. So if you notice, even with these pictures, it's not just the rhino running, but it's knocking everything over. You have the vase, you have the phone, everything's just kind of like stopped in midair. And that's a really cool feature of this book that really, again, places you in the chaos of what's going on with Jumanji. Even here's another beautiful image. In the book, a volcano is basically erupting inside of the house. And it's being met with right after the house just got flooded. So there's a bunch of steam inside of the house from the volcano, magma and lava meeting the water, and just the steam. Like, you can see it. It's so beautifully crafted inside of this book. It really, again, makes you feel like you're inside of the story. You're being enclosed upon. Even at the end of the story, you're still at that child's point of view. Like, you're not above the girl, and you're not seeing even the parents' faces. You're just seeing them, the kids, for the most part, who just went through this journey, and you went through the journey together. And I think that's really, really beautiful. And oh my gosh, all the shadows on like the boy's shirt. It's just amazing how much detail is in these black and white photos. I can't emphasize enough how awesome the pictures are. One of the images, though, that is not from the child's point of view, it's like you're above the game. And this is really prevalent in the first few pages of the book when you're starting to just be introduced to the characters. Like, you're kind of above them in a way and not really with them yet until they finally start playing the game. But once the game opens and everything starts to happen, you're right there with them and you're dealing with everything that they're dealing with, which is really cool. Another thing I thought was really interesting about this book is that it's kind of aided by the pictures, but it could be a very nice short story if you just had to read it without necessarily the pictures with it. That's how nice of a quality the story is. A lot of picture books, you need like the pictures to help support what's going on. And while you obviously very clearly need the pictures to support the story itself, if a few extra like details were added to the paragraphs, you could read this as a short story. So as you can tell, there's a lot of words on each page. It's probably not really a book for a young child. It's more for somebody who is a little bit older, maybe like second or third grade, a little bit around there, where they could handle this much text and still really enjoy the story. Finally, I just wanted to point out a point from the story that just really, really irked me, and that's the ending. And I don't want to spoil the ending per se, but I guess I'm going to spoil the ending. So if you are really interested in reading this book and you really want to know exactly what the ending is, then stop right here. But if you're cool with just watching the rest of the video, then stick around. So at the end, Peter and Judy are just done with the game. They're like, we're getting rid of it. We're going to put it back under the tree where we found it. And in the last page, we learn about one of the family friends of the parents that were missing for a little bit. They were gone for a few hours for prepping for like a little party. And the woman's sons, you learn that they find the game at the very end of the book. And there's a couple things that are so interesting. Like the last paragraph says, 2 boys were running through the park. They were Danny and Walter Budwig, and Danny had a long, thin box under his arm. And then there's an image very similar to the first one when you see both Judy and Peter running together to the park to find this box. It's very similar again to them finding it. So you're back at that point of view of above the situation, above them, but you know that something bad's going to happen. So it almost like sets up that next storyline, but it's a cliffhanger of like somebody else is going to have to deal with this book. There's no Robin Williams in this book. That character was made for the movie. There is like somebody who comes out of the story, and he's like a map guide guy, but he's very not useful at all to the overall like children trying to get through the situation that they're in. But overall, I think that this book is awesome. It was a Caldecott Medal winner, so obviously got a lot of praise back in the day for its images, and still do. So that is my review of the book Jumanji. Hope you enjoyed, and maybe you'll stick around for more videos as I have to make them.